This episode of the Matt Feret Show is brought to you by the Brickhouse Agency. Brickhouse is a boutique independent health insurance agency that focuses on finding the right Medicare coverage for folks across the country. Matt's wife, Nikki, is the heart behind Brickhouse. She's great at making confusing things clear and is passionate about helping people find a Medicare insurance policy that suits their individual needs. To schedule a free one-on-one appointment with Nikki or a member of her team, head on over to brickhouseagency.com or simply call 844-844-6565 and someone will help you schedule a phone call or a Zoom meeting. The consultation is free because the insurance companies pay Brickhouse, not you. There's never any pressure or obligation to enroll. Your clearer, simpler Medicare journey is just a call or click away. brickhouseagency.com. Not affiliated with or endorsed by the government or federal Medicare program. Contacting Brickhouse Agency, LLC will direct you to a licensed insurance agent.
Hello everyone, this is Matt Feret, author of Prepare for Medicare and Prepare for Social Security Insiders Guidebooks and online course training series. Welcome to another episode of the Matt Feret Show, where I interview insiders and experts to help light a path to successful living in midlife, retirement, and beyond. Alyssa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
It's awesome that you're here. So tell everybody what you do, how long you've been doing it, and how you help people.
I am a travel advisor. I have been technically booking travel for 20 years in the corporate space, but I set out my own business in 2022. So I've been doing the private space for about a year and a half now, and I help solo travelers get out into the world to see this beautiful place that we live in, feeling confident and like they can actually do it, because sometimes it seems a little overwhelming.
Yeah, so solo travel, I would assume that can come in all shapes and forms, which is solo, not yet partnered or married, post-partner marriage, and I guess widowed or widower. I'm not sure if that's a word, but it sounds like it might be. So let's talk about solo travel just in general. What are some of the things you help people with, and what are some of the challenges that people find when doing solo travel?
So for solo travel, I think it's kind of scary. I tend to attract women into my audience in particular, and I think there is a specific set of fears that we have traveling out in the world solo, or really going anywhere solo. There's a level of safety concerns. I have found also that folks are really nervous to eat dinner alone or even appear anywhere alone, whether that's some sort of perceived judgment on the part of others. I'm not sure, but that's a very common concern that I hear. And so a lot of times people will come to me and ask, is there any sort of tour, like a group tour? I want to go out and travel, but I don't really want to be completely alone. So they'll ask for tours or, like I said, safety tips, because folks that don't fly a lot may not realize that you can't bring pepper spray on planes. You can't bring, things like we as women would typically carry in the United States, things to protect ourselves. So that's a really big concern. And then just the sheer overwhelming amount of things there are to know about traveling. And if you're alone, you have nobody else to ask. You're reliant completely on yourself. And so that's a big concern too, is how do I know what I need to know? Because I don't.
Yeah, let's talk first about that sense of overwhelm. I mean, in the last 20 years, you've got all the travel websites, and then the travel websites that aggregate the travel websites. And then you've got deals that you can only get on the particular carrier website or the hotel website. But then sometimes you go on another website and they're giving discounts off that deal that are supposed to be the lowest. Like, where do people start just in travel in general? Like, it's on the self-serve piece, and then we'll get to how you can help them.
Yeah, that's a great question. As a travel agent, I get to see the back end of all these systems, and even for us, it's very overwhelming. So as a consumer coming to it with, someone that doesn't spend literally hours a week diving into travel, it's so overwhelming. My best advice here would be to stick with carrier websites or book directly with brands. There's, those prices from the booking agents like Booking and Travelocity and Expedia, etc. But they're usually cheap for a reason. I'm actually helping somebody right now who sort of booked a very cheap deal and regretted it because it's very hard to service on the back end. So that's something to start with, is that when you book through a third-party website, you're technically not in charge of the booking. So you have to contact them to make any sort of changes, which can just add a whole nother level of stress to it. So booking directly with, the hotel, the cruise line, the flight carrier, that's probably a good place to start rather than any of those overwhelming, flight booking sites.
And then you get down to things that you do and people in your profession, which is help out. So with the overwhelm, or with the, the perceived deals you can only get online or only with the carrier, where do you fit into that?
So like I mentioned, I spend literally hours every week combing through websites. I get so many travel newsletters you would not believe, Matt. I spend so much time reading about the latest updates, the latest cruise line, hotel, resort chain updates. Things are being sold off and bought and just changed and renovated all the time. And so that's literally what I do, is I intake all this information. So by the time someone comes to me and tells me what they're looking for, it's usually pretty quick that I can have an idea or two of the best place to send them. Whereas they would spend 20, 30 hours researching, they can come to me and fill out a form, and within probably 10 minutes, I have an idea of things to recommend to them.
It's awesome. There's a lot around the websites and the wonderful world of the internet, specials, exclusives, but also brands, and certain brands. I mean, I get them in my mailbox. You probably do. Well, I definitely know you do. That are geared towards, people in different ages and phases and stages of their life, particularly in the 40s, 50s, and retirement crowd. Are there particular brands that are better suited? And if you don't want to talk about them, by name, that's fine. But are there particular brands that kind of cater to more of an audience of 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, or is it really just marketing?
A little bit of both. There are cruise lines in particular that cater to sort of that 40s, 50s, 60s, and older crowd. Holland America is a really, really good line. Viking, Virgin Voyages does a bit. They have a different flavor to them. Escorted tours, those type of, group tours that you'll book a pair or 3 or 4 and then show up and you'll be in a group in a motor coach. Those are typically historically marketed towards an older group, although they're skewing a little bit younger now post-pandemic. But those are typically skewed toward an older group. And then river cruising, particularly in the US. I didn't know about this until I became a travel advisor, but you can actually take a gorgeous river cruise up and down the Mississippi. And those river cruises are typically toward an older crowd as well.
I don't think I knew that either. And I've lived around the Mississippi for most of my adult life. I didn't know you could cruise up and down. I guess I never looked.
Yeah, they're really great. There's a couple different lines. I think Viking does one, American Queen Voyages does one, and there's similar cruises around the Great Lakes as well.
Thank you. So let's hop into single travel. I said at the onset, that can happen for a lot of reasons, or just preference. Maybe I just want to go on a trip with my guy friends or my girlfriends, which I guess is technically a group and not single travel. But what are the intricacies around single travel that people? You mentioned the fears, but what do people need to think of when booking this stuff?
Yeah, so solo travel is kind of a whole different animal. A lot of places, especially in Europe in particular, and on cruises, you'll have to pay what's called a single supplement. So that could be either, particularly on a cruise, it'll actually be double, because cruise cabins are based on 2 people per cabin. So even if you're just one person in that cabin, typically you'll still have to pay for that second person, which is a little wild, I know. And then a lot of times in Europe, if you're on one of those escorted tours, they'll also charge a single supplement. It won't usually be double, but it'll be several $100s more than what you would pay, if you were a pair kind of breaking up a hotel room. They'll charge that single supplement. And that's something I think a lot of people don't realize until they've taken their first trip. And sometimes even if you're not doing an escorted tour, the hotel will charge kind of an upcharge to have a single room too. So that does kind of throw people for a loop.
Yeah, it throws me for a loop. I mean, you're still getting the same amount of money for the room or the cabin, and they're just adding on a surcharge. Is that because from a business standpoint, that's not 2 people eating their food and 2 people buying their trinkets? It's just one?
That's what I'm guessing, particularly with cruises. A lot of the money is made on the back end, after the people are on the cruise. And so they're sort of missing out on that second person's internet, drink package, because the drink package is only benefit the cruise line. They very rarely benefit the passenger. Photo sales, casino gambling. So they're sort of missing out on that second person's post-cruise sales. So they kind of have to find a way to make it up.
Well, that stinks.
It does.
Well, how do I find cruise or vacation packages that don't do that?
So
or are those fees buried or right at checkout?
A little bit of both. The nice thing is some folks are realizing that solo passengers, one, do exist, and two, really want to go on these cruises. And so some cruise lines are starting to create solo traveler cabins designed for the solo traveler in mind. Lines like Norwegian, Virgin Voyages, and Celebrity are designing these inside and balcony cabins that are meant for just one person, and they are charged at that single person rate, so you won't have to pay double. And there's always sales on board. So a lot of the river cruise lines have single supplement sales, whether either be none or it'll be like $100, which is in my mind fine. I'll pay $100 extra to travel solo. And then same with the escorted tour groups. There's always sales on. They won't always be happening at the same time, but the best way, if you're not using an advisor, is to subscribe to those overwhelming newsletters, because usually that's where they advertise them. And they'll come across as flash sales a lot of the time too. So unless you're up to date all the time, checking websites and things, you'll want to be subscribed to those newsletters to get those solo travel deals.
It still sounds kind of exhausting for the solo traveler to go do this as compared to even a couples or a friend travel, like two people plus. What's your advice? I mean, we know where to start, right? We can go spend hours going down internet wormholes of travel and deals and sign up for this stuff. But how do you specifically help? And this is your specialty, solo travel. So how do you approach this kind of thing? And what do you find most popular? And how do you kind of navigate this stuff for people?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, it is my specialty. So I sort of have curated my email newsletter subscriptions down to, the solo traveler specials. And so I have an email newsletter that I then push those out to folks that are on my newsletter. So they just need to get one. They don't need to be subscribed to 20 like I am. I also talk about them on my TikTok and my Instagram frequently in my stories, just to kind of keep people up to date again, so they don't have to be the ones going through and combing through all those newsletters. And then I also do groups that I take myself that are technically solo travel, but you're still with some other people. So it kind of takes, one, the guesswork out, and two, because I'm able to secure group prices, it kind of evens out that solo supplement.
Yeah, that's a nice little nuance there. I mean, it reminds me, so you've got pure solo travel, and then you've got solo travel within a group, and that reminds me of some travel or adventure groups that are set up around the country and different, and again, those are usually for older adults, not necessarily singles, underage, whatever, 30. How popular are those? How useful are those? Do they all do all the booking themselves, or do they use someone like you? How does all that work? How should I think about that?
So typically, and when I first came across the idea, these solo travel groups where like an influencer or a creator or a travel professional would be taking these people out on a single trip were for women in their 20s and 30s, and that was it. And something that existed in a space for folks in their 40s, 50s, 60s didn't actually exist. And so that's something that I heard from my following, was that they really loved this idea of this baby step to solo travel. So we would go on the same tour or be at the same resort or be on the same cruise, have our own experience, but I would be there to ask any questions. If anything went wrong, they have sort of a safety net. And then we would have optional dinners together, since that was one of people's, main kind of stopping points from booking solo travel. And so I expected it to be women in their 20s and 30s, because that's what I was seeing. And what I actually found was it's more women in their late 40s to late 60s that are booking these trips with me, that have waited their entire life to go on a trip and have found this opportunity to come travel with other like-minded people in a group, but still kind of solo. And so they don't have to take care of, securing the group hotel, securing the resort or the cruise. The only thing that I ask that they take care of is their flight booking. They can ask me questions, of course, but a lot of them choose to use miles or points when booking at this stage, because a lot of people have miles banked from the pandemic still. So they have all these miles and nowhere to go. And so I'm providing them with an opportunity to do it. It's just a lot easier. They have me in their back pocket to ask questions. me to do all those group booking, share the group policies, share packing lists, most in particular, which I think is really helpful for them. And then they get to sort of connect with the other people going in the group.
Yeah, as I sit here and think about it, the solo group piece, before we go just to the solo piece, but the solo group piece, you said, I don't know if you said that was a gateway way, or maybe I'm thinking the phrase gateway drug, but that's
a baby step.
Baby step. That's a
baby
much
step
better way of saying that. Yeah, I guess I think there would be differences there between couples travel than individual group travel. So what are the different, you said eating, dining, I mean, yeah, I don't want to eat alone in my stateroom or wherever I am. What are the differences between that type of just regular vacation package for a couple or two people going and a group of solo travelers beyond eating, right, in the group? What else are the benefits of doing that?
So the benefit is, we have a closed motor coach. I'm thinking of just the one that's coming up next. We have a closed motor coach that's just people that have signed up on the trip through me. It's a private trip. So you're sort of getting, that there's going to be folks that are like-minded. So if you go on an escort tour as a couple, you can sign up and go on the same tour, but you'll be on a motor coach with who knows how many kind of people. They could be families, all different ages, all different interests, where if you go in a group like this or your own, people can set up their own private groups. You're in like in a space with people that are of the same mind as you. And so this one that I'm thinking of that we're going on next, we're going to Ireland and Scotland. So there's a semi-structured portion of the day with tours as a group, walking tours and distillery experiences. And then you get half the day to go and do your own thing. So you do get that structured time with a guide, with the group, and then you do get to challenge yourself a little bit and go out and do things on your own. So that's where the solo travel part comes in. And that's where that like baby step for solo travel comes in. If you were with a partner, you'd still get that same unstructured time, but you'd be with your partner or a friend or whatever. This, you're truly on your own to decide what you want to do. And so there are unstructured meal times. So you can challenge yourself to go eat dinner alone, or you can make friends with some people in the group and go out with them, or make friends with locals or whatever.
That's really nice. Yeah, because I there's two ways I'm thinking about this. One, I'm single and I'd like to be around people and travel together and have a shared experience. But also there's another way of I'm single and yeah, I want some, I like my singledom. I want some interaction, but I also want some me time and some solo time.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. And that's really why I created these, was because I know people are sort of in that same space. I have lots of women that are coming that are married and have partners, and their partner isn't interested in traveling or doesn't want to do travel to the places where they want to go. So there are partnered people coming on the trip. Like, it's not just for single people, but they want that solo time, that time to kind of find themselves a little bit. I was able to dive deep. I did get divorced, and that's sort of what kicked off my solo travel interest. So it gives them time to dive deep and figure out a little bit more about themselves, and sort of like really reflect on who they are when they're not with somebody else. What are their interests actually when they're not with somebody else? And I think that's a really important part of solo travel that gets overlooked when you're always traveling with somebody else.
I bet. And I bet you also probably run into people whose husbands or wives are still working and they're not. And they can't take time off, but someone else can. I mean, like maybe there's an age gap of, let's call it 5 years. Well, if you retire or you retire early and the other partner's got 5 years left, what are you supposed to do? Sit around for 5 years?
Yeah, exactly. That happened to my parents. My dad retired 2 years earlier than my mom. And so he was living the lovely retired life, and she was having to go into work. And as soon as she retired, literally the week that she retired, they went on this amazing, cross-country road trip in their trailer. But for those 2 years, he was sitting around, just hanging around the house, because what else was he going to do?
Yeah. So that's the group travel piece. Let's go into the single travel piece, which is non-group. How do you suggest, or how do you work with people on that type of adventure?
So same process as I do for any type of travel client. Folks will send in a form that's full of information about things that they were looking for. So that helps me really narrow down the options. So it could be a cruise. It could be, just a relaxing, all-inclusive resort vacation on a beach somewhere. It could be a European tour. It could be a tour in Asia, really, literally anything. Fill out that form. And it's sort of the same process for me as it is to book any sort of group or any sort of, couple or partner tour. I narrow down all of the, single supplement sales and prices that are going to be kind of way too over budget for a single traveler, so that they don't have to. So it's kind of the same process, but they still have me to kind of curate their options so that they're not sitting there, because as a single or solo person, they don't have someone else to bounce ideas off of. It's 100% in their court rather than sharing that planning responsibility with anybody. And even with a group, it's easier because you can kind of bounce ideas around in a group chat, get a kind of a group consensus. But when it's you, you're the one, it's you. You have no one else to like make decisions, which can be a double-edged sword. It can be a good and a bad thing. You get to advocate for yourself and do what you want to do, but you also don't have anyone else to kind of please or compromise with. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword there.
Yeah, and I would imagine too, when you use a group setting, as you said, you can kind of come to a group consensus. But also, I would imagine the packages are just that, right? There are, Scotland, Ireland, or river cruise down the Rhine, or some of the. I mean, not knocking those at all, but there usually aren't like expeditions in the Andes, or a solo tour around Thailand. Some of these more exotic or more very specific things. Call me crazy, but I want to go to Antarctica sometime in my life.
Oh, that's on my bucket list too.
Yeah, right. I don't know that those are there are group tours. I don't know that there are, but I would imagine the logistics on solo travel are much more complex when going to these kind of far-flung places or these bucket list items, as opposed to the group thing. How much additional planning does that take? You said a lot of it's on the individual. If they don't have a group, like a motor coach, like you said, they don't have something shuttling them to and fro. What are the other things? What are the complexities of that solo travel beyond, let's just say, the norm? I don't know. Well, maybe it's the norm. The normal kind of packages, the popular ones in, Western Europe or the Americas.
Yeah, you mentioned a really good one yourself, and that's the transportation, is figuring out how you're going to get from point A to point B. It's a lot cheaper to ride share or grab a taxi when you're in a group of 4 or 5 even than when you're by yourself, because you can split the cost between, you and the other people in your group. So just by definition, solo travel is going to be more expensive because you're footing the entire bill. So that just adds another level of preparation need and complexity to it. So besides the transport, there's also, figuring out lodging. When you're with a group, you can usually, as I do, get group rates, if there's enough folks in your group. But when you're solo, you can literally stay anywhere. You could stay in a hostel if you wanted. You could stay in a 5-star, luxury 4-diamond resort if you wanted. But that's all up to you to figure out. And that cost is totally on you. And so I keep coming back to cost, but really in my mind, that's the differentiating factor, is not having anybody else to split that cost of burden with, so that it does, I don't want to say dampen, but it does possibly lessen the variety of activities that you can do, because everyone's on some type of budget, whether that budget is a lot or a little. We're all on some type of budget. And so that not having anybody else traveling with you to split those costs really can kind of lower the amount of times that you can solo travel. And also, if you're afraid of flying, like I am, yes, as a person who books travel for a living and travels a lot, I do not like getting on flights, and it is a lot scarier when you're a solo person. So if that's something that frightens you, and it totally does me, it's fine. But it can kind of limit where you might be interested in going in any one shot. A flight to the other side of the country is a lot different than a flight to South America to get, to Antarctica. It's a lot different than, going to Dubai. So that also is kind of a limiting factor when you're not traveling with anybody else.
So Antarctica, Dubai, et cetera, in terms of the volume of these group solo, I can think of the group /solo adventures, are they typically I'll say it again, the normal ones, the kind of the, Scotland, Ireland, England, that sort of thing? Or do they go to those exotic locations? And can you say, I want to go to Machu Picchu, or I want to hike a section of the Andes and I'm 60 and I'm not really sure how to do it or what equipment I need? It seems more complex than just hanging out on a cruise ship. Do those more complex kind of exotic group /solo organizations or packages exist?
They do. And I think they're only not booked because people don't think about it. And I think nobody's asked that question that you've just asked, is, does this exist and can I do it? So there are a couple tour companies that I work with that they will take as little as 2 people on a tour. So a lot of the, the European tour companies, they have to sell out before they'll, or they have a very large minimum number of people before they'll say, yes, this tour is happening. One of them, the ones that I work with, does these exotic locations, does Machu Picchu, does like hiking through the Andes, does Dubai, and they'll go with as few as 2 people. So you could end up on a tour with one other person and you get that same experience that they would get if there was 30 people there. So I think that's the thing, is nobody thinks to ask, and nobody thinks like, ooh, could I go and see Antarctica alone? The answer is yes, you totally could do that. It does exist. And they're actually really great tours, because they're usually more intimate, because not a lot of people think to do them.
That's awesome. So I want to get to, I'm going to hit it really hard in a minute here, the solo travel and the safety piece, and what's real and what's not, what's overblown and what isn't. But what are some of the, I got to ask this now, what are some of the coolest exotic location trips, adventure, etc., that you've ever either been on or sponsored or seen out there for the solo group traveler?
Well, Antarctica, as we already talked about, that's every February, it seems on social media, that's sort of Antarctica cruise season. That's the main way that people get down there, is they'll take an Antarctic cruise. And so you'll see people sailing over the Drake Passage. The cruise ship will be kind of like this.
I can't imagine.
For like a day or two to get down to Antarctica.
Yeah, you're worried about flying. I don't want to be in a boat that's doing that.
Yeah, so heads up for people wanting to go to Antarctica, there's about a day or two of this, most likely, through the Drake Passage. So that's really cool. I'm working on a trip now for somebody to Argentina, like a luxury trip of food and wine lovers, but they want to go all through the southern tip, like go over to Chile and see the glacier fjords, go through Ushuaia and the whole Tierra del Fuego. I don't book that very often. I love Argentina. I think it's amazing. And then I've been seeing some really cool tours in Japan that have just opened pre-pandemic, because they took a little while longer to open than a lot of other places. That just kind of go around all of Japan. So you get the snowy capped mountains in the north, and then you get all like the tropical goodness in the south, and goes all through Japan. And I think that's a really cool, super intensive way to see the country.
That's awesome. So as I promised, or I said before, solo travel. You mentioned at the very beginning of the show, you can't take pepper spray on a plane. And I think there could be certain, I would be somewhat wary of working with you or doing it on my own and saying, yeah, I'm going to go hang out in Argentina for a week or 2 weeks and go make my own travel itinerary. And then you get on the government websites and you see what countries are red, what countries are orange, even I was looking at Mexico, I don't know, 6 months ago, and they were like, don't travel here, don't take Ubers. Very specific stuff. So there's a lot of this kind of fear out there that's non-specific. Don't travel to this country. Really? The whole thing is, how do I think about safety and solo travel?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I'm glad you brought up Mexico in particular, because what people I think have to remember is that Mexico's a really big country. There's parts of it, yes, that are dangerous, but there's parts of it that are super safe. I have a cousin that's lived in Mexico, 20 plus years now, has never had a problem, lives in this lovely little area in Baja California, super duper safe. So I think, yes, do pay attention to the warnings, because they're there for a reason, but also don't lump in a whole country with 1 or 2 dangerous areas. So be more specific when you're looking at those large countries, Mexico, Argentina, any of these historically what we think of as dangerous countries. Be more specific in the areas that you're looking at, rather than just being scared of the country as a whole. There's places in the US that I feel less safe than places that I go in Mexico. So that's one piece of advice. And then the second piece of advice is, as you mentioned, we can't take pepper spray or, knives on a plane. What do you do when you're out, solo touring by yourself? So some things that I do are I carry a bag that's pickpocket proof. So it has slash proof straps, the zipper sort of locked together, pockets are, buried really deep inside. I have for my passport, some travel clothing that I wear that has internal pockets and zippable pockets. So you can keep your cash and your credit cards and your passport literally on your person the whole time. This is really important for places like, the Mediterranean area in the summer when pickpockets are really, really high. The best piece of advice that I have for everybody about safety is to listen to your gut. It will never steer you wrong. It has never steered me wrong. It doesn't matter if you have a tour plan to go somewhere, if you really want to see this thing, if you come up to it or you turn the corner and something just feels off, don't do it. Just turn around, walk away. And then particularly if you're solo traveling, just be mindful of how much alcohol you consume, because you want to keep your awareness around you at all times. And that sort of goes hand in hand with that listening to your gut. It's literally never steered me wrong, and it will never steer you wrong.
You know, when I was a younger man, I remember walking around, college areas and college campuses late at night, going from place to place. And, we all used to make fun of, why do women go to the restroom together? Why do women always gather in clumps? And when I was young, and I didn't really even think of it because I'm a guy and I'm just wandering around and I'm untouchable when I'm in my, late teens or early 20s. But, it was basically like, yeah, women can't do that, because every time you're out solo, you've got to be looking over your shoulder or worry about your physical safety. And I remember thinking way back when I was, first introduced to that, like, it just kind of punched me right in the face. Like, oh yeah, I don't have to live that way at all, or rarely have to live that way. And that's a real difference. Stuck with me my whole life, that even day to day walking, traveling, especially, I got to think women have different self-awareness, different fears. They're looking at the passersby, they're looking at the restaurants differently, they're looking at the lighting, the stuff that I don't even think about. And maybe I'm just naive that I need to think about it too. But let's talk about women and solo travel, or even solo group travel, and safety. What are the realities there, and what's just probably overblown, and what's maybe not talked about enough?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And thank you for recognizing that and for saying that. It's a whole different ballgame traveling solo as a woman versus traveling solo as a man, or even in groups. Like you said, there's just a different day-to-day reality for women. We are a lot more hyper aware of our surroundings. I would never go through a dark alleyway by myself, where, when I was married, my ex would have no problem walking down a dark alleyway because he's a man. And
wouldn't even think of it. Just be like,
no, yeah, exactly. And I was like, are you sure that we want to go down there? Men don't think about it because it's not part of their reality. And so, especially in traveling in a foreign country, it's something to be really aware of. And like I said, super trust your gut on this, particularly when you're in a country where the language spoken isn't your native language. And so you're not, necessarily understanding what people are saying. It's going to be really important to rely on your intuition. And again, trust those feelings as a woman that we've lived with our whole lives, that helps us kind of suss out some sketchy situations. That's really going to be your best friend. And I will say I've never had a problem when I'm solo traveling, so I don't want it to sound really scary, but use your level of everyday awareness, maybe up 1 or 2 notches, as you're going around a foreign country, and start off somewhere, like I said, that speaks your native language. My first solo trip was to England. 1, because I was really interested in British history, but 2, because they speak English, and I knew it would be a nice, easy jumping off point for me to kind of get started. And so you build that confidence traveling in a different country, and then you can kind of step it up from there.
So yeah, it's kind of like the old Spidey sense, right? It's go somewhere that's a little more comfortable first, and then step it up. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Personal protection, right? The Spidey sense, the trust your gut piece. Are there, and you mentioned language barrier, right? Which you don't know what's being mumbled or said, and that can be unnerving. It could be talking about, the tapas, or it could be talking about you, and you don't know. I can get that to be unnerving. What are there sections? Maybe this isn't a fair question. Are there sections of the world that solo travel you call a timeout on just because?
I think it's different for every person and their risk tolerance. For me, it would be places, obviously that there's currently a war happening. Like, I'm not going to be going to Russia or Ukraine anytime soon.
Yeah, that'd be on my list.
Or for me in particular, places that are less friendly to women, countries that are maybe the Taliban's in charge of right now, or that have different rules for women that I may not know. I'm not personally going to go to those countries by myself because I don't want to unknowingly break a rule. I want to respect the cultures of countries that I'm visiting. And if I'm not an expert in that country and I don't know, what parts of me need to be covered or whether it's allowed for a woman to go out at a certain time. I'm not going to do that. Egypt, for example, is a really good example. It's totally on my bucket list, but a fellow travel agent was telling me that she will only go, she's an Egypt expert, actually. She'll only go with a group or a guide. Even if she's solo, she'll always have a guide with her because she doesn't want to unknowingly break a custom or a rule that might put her at risk. So she won't even kind of wander around there. And again, that comes up to everybody's risk tolerance level. And I really want to go visit some of these countries, but because I don't know the nuances, I want to be really, really respectful of these countries that I want to go visit. But I also don't want to be putting myself into risk either.
Makes a lot of sense. Group travel in my brain typically ends up coming up with some sort of insurance. And even solo travel. So let's talk about trip insurance first. Will you please tell me whether or not I need to buy trip insurance? And if I buy it, is it kind of one of those things? It's like almost like when I'm buying, I'm replacing tires on my car. Well, we'll replace it 100% unless you hit a duck, or unless you hit a curb, or unless the tire goes flat, or like it's, you read the fine print and you're like, wait a minute, what am I actually paying for? Do I need travel insurance?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked that question. I actually make clients sign a waiver that they chose to decline if they decline travel insurance. It's that important, and I want to make it that clear to clients that I feel like it's pretty much a necessity when you go. Now, the difference is what travel insurance do you book? Because you'll run into those situations, like you said, with tire insurance where, oh yeah, if you got sick on a Wednesday at noon and it's this very specific disease, then you're covered and then you're good. But anything else, sorry. So typically what I have found is the insurances that are offered, when you purchase a flight, there's always are you sure you want to insure your purchase at the end? Or if you book with a cruise line or resort, they usually have a insurance that kind of is with it. Do not book those insurances. They're really hard to work with. I learned this the hard way with a client. They are those type of, tire insurances where they have all these very specific conditions that they'll pay out under, and they won't pay very much. So my advice is to book a third-party travel insurance. Particularly, I really like Travel Insured is what I use for myself. Travel Guard is really good as well. They have different rules. So I'll speak about Travel Insured because I'm not sure about the other ones, but they have a cancel for any reason policy that if you purchase it within 21 days of your initial travel deposit date, you get 75% back for canceling for any reason. You could just decide you don't want to go and they'll give you 75% back. So purchasing that insurance in a timely manner is critical. And they'll give you cash back versus whether if you buy an insurance policy through, the cruise line or the resort, you usually get a travel credit versus cash back in your pocket. So that's the other benefit of working with a third-party travel insurer is you'll get cash back because they're not affiliated with anybody. So they can't give you a credit back. You'll just get cash back in your pocket. And policies vary state by state. So it's really important for people to read the policy documents before they purchase of whatever policy they're reading. See, if they're purchasing outside that 21-day mark, see what the cancellation conditions are. If there's a particular thing they're worried about, usually that's what happens is someone's like, oh, my parents are, not doing so well. What if I need to cancel my trip? So they can look with that specific situation in mind and see if that's something that's covered under that policy.
Well, that's really good. In the wild, wonderful world of insurance, I do have one more question about that. So, if I've got a medical condition or a chronic condition and I feel like it's holding me back, but darn it, I want to travel, but I'm kind of worried, what if I lose my prescriptions? What if I fall? What if I get sick? What if I have a really bad accident and I've got to be airlifted places? So on the medical side of thing, on the solo travel or even the group solo travel, what should I be looking for there that would ease my mind? I mean, I don't want to not travel because I feel like something might happen or that I've got some condition that, might limit me or cause me to have an emergency in a foreign country. What should I be thinking about around the medical piece of this?
Yeah. So all those third-party insurance covers, they will cover medical things as well. One of them, Travel Insured, offers, with the exception of 5 states because of insurance laws, an annual travel insurance policy. So it'll cover all of your trips for a whole year versus having to purchase each one. And so you just need, again, to read those documents of what's covered, but they have really great coverage amounts in general for medical issues, for airlifting, and you can customize those plans too in most states, where you can, check a box if you want repatriation coverage, check a box if you want medical evacuation coverage, check a box if you want electronic device coverage. If you're kind of doing a work vacation trip and you've got your work laptop with you, you want to have that, electronic device protection to protect, your work laptop or whatever, if you got some expensive camera equipment with you. So you can kind of check and uncheck and add and subtract these policies that are kind of riders onto the main policy based on your particular concern level.
Yeah. And it's probably, this gets again into crazy insurance speak, but that's because it's kind of part of what I do. Yeah. I mean, people are, if they're still employed, they have usually group sponsored health insurance. You got to read your policy because you don't know how much foreign travel is covered. If you're on Medicare, there are certain Medicare plans that cover travel outside the US, and there are ones that don't, or they get capped at $50,000. Given the nuance and given the fact that no one listening besides a nerd like me around this stuff is going to want to ask, call and look in all their paperwork, is it just a pretty good idea to go get some sort of medical coverage, even if maybe even you're doubling up?
Yeah, 100%, because you never know what could happen, especially if you're on a cruise and you're in international waters. Their health insurance, I believe, isn't going to kick in. And cruise ship doctors, I know from personal experience, are very expensive. So please don't travel without the travel insurance. You never know when you might need it. At some point, your insurance here either won't kick in or a limit will kick in and you'll need that supplemental travel insurance. And just from a professional's perspective, I purchase it every single time I go. I live in one of the 5 states that you can't have an annual policy. And so I spend the money every single time I travel, and I travel a lot. So that's how important it is that I'm buying it every single time. And I'm only 38 and I'm in relatively good health, and I'm still purchasing it every single time I travel.
That's good advice. And yeah, you said international waters. There are things in Medicare that are like, well, you're covered here and you're covered in transit to Alaska, but not to other places. It's like, it's mind-boggling. I don't even remember it, but I know it's there. I'd have to go look it up, and I do Medicare every single day. So yeah, that's great advice on that piece. I've also heard of instances where people are on vacation and get into like an ATV accident and they get airlifted, even if they may not have been able to be airlifted, and they get presented with a $15,000 bill.
Yep, those things can happen, and you'll be shocked. Even dental care in particular, again, another personal situation. I had a cracked tooth on a cruise ship. There's no dentist on a cruise ship. So if you need to visit a dentist in a foreign country, you'll want to have some kind of insurance to cover it for you. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. So solo travel, trust your gut, maybe find a group, maybe take baby steps in that travel piece. What questions or other advice around not only travel, but solo travel or solo group travel did I not ask or touch on that I should have?
So I think the thing I really enjoy making sure people know is must-haves for packing, regardless of whether you're going for a group, regardless of whether you're solo traveling. So back to what I just said about the dental issue, I always pack a dental repair kit, one of those little tiny tubes of cement that you can get on Amazon or at a store. I was able to fill my own cracked tooth, and so well, the dentist that I saw when I got back home asked me, "Are you sure you did this yourself?" Because like I said, there's no dentist on a cruise ship, or usually when you're out traveling, you might not necessarily want to avail yourself of the local dental care. But
I had no idea that you could self-fill a tool. That's a new one on me. That's
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. Great and I only know that from personal experience because I've had, an open cavity, and air on an open cavity is really painful. And so that's something that I always recommend. And almost nobody's ever thought of that before. And the tube of cement is, like super tiny, so it's not taking up space. Also a really basic medical first aid kit, just with travel sizes of things like pain reliever or cold medicine. Because sometimes in other countries, they either outright won't have what you're looking for, or they'll have a different brand or different type that you're not sure, especially if you're on a lot of medication. I've run into that situation too, where clients were on a lot of specific medication that can only take specific remedies. So you'll want to make sure that you have those with you as well. And then I always bring with me, I might be an overpacker, but I know a lot of people advise packing cubes. I bring vacuum bags. So they make like the ones that you hook a vacuum up to, like a space saver bag. They make travel ones with a travel pump so that you can still carry a carry-on or your check bag or whatever, but you're taking up a lot less space and it's a lot more organized. You can fit a lot more in there, but you just have to keep in mind the weight limits of your luggage. But that's sort of like a packing hack that I don't see around a lot, is to use those space saver bags made for travel that come with a little pump so you can do it yourself.
Yeah, that's all awesome advice. This has been really enlightening and a lot of fun. And now I'm thinking about Antarctica and how the heck I'm going to go do it.
It's a pricey one, so you'll need to save up for it. It's definitely not like a spur of the moment trip, but it's definitely on my bucket list too. I'm gonna get there someday, Matt.
Yeah, well, me too. Maybe I'll see you there. Thanks so much for all your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
The Matt Feret Show, related content, publications, and MF Media LLC is in no way associated, endorsed, or authorized by any governmental agency, including the Social Security Administration, the Department of Health and Human Services, or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The Matt Feret Show is in no way associated with, authorized, approved, endorsed, nor in any way affiliated with any company, trademark names, or other marks mentioned or referenced in or on The Matt Feret Show. Any such mention is for purpose of reference only. Any advice, generalized statistics, or opinions expressed are strictly those of the host and guests of The Matt Feret Show. Although every effort has been made to ensure the contents of The Matt Feret Show and related content are correct and complete, laws and regulations change quickly and often. The ideas and opinions expressed on The Matt Feret Show aren't meant to replace the sage advice of healthcare, insurance, financial planning, accounting, or legal professionals. You are responsible for your financial decisions. It is your sole responsibility to independently evaluate the accuracy, correctness, or completeness of the content, services, and products of, and associated with, The Matt Feret Show, MF Media LLC, and any related content or publications. The thoughts and opinions expressed on The Matt Feret Show are those of the host and The Matt Feret Show guests only, and are not the thoughts and opinions of any current or former employer of the host or guests of The Matt Feret Show, nor is The Matt Feret Show made by, on behalf of, or endorsed or approved by any current or former employer of the host or guests of The Matt Feret Show.